Hello and welcome. We're going to start in just a few moments. We'll give task force members just another minute or two to join. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome. My name is Judy Chan, and I'm the Deputy Director of Digital Services at C2C. Welcome to the June eTranscript Task Force meeting. Today is the last meeting of the series where we'll be identifying recommendations to put forth to the master plan on career education based on some discussions and work from the last 5 months. Thank you to task force members and members of the public who are with us today and who have been with us along the way. With that, I'll hand it over to our facilitator, Kathy Booth at West Ed, who will take us through the plan for today.
Hi, great to see everybody. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in today's meetings. So before we really dive in, I'm going to make sure that I'm giving input to members of the public about ways that you can be sharing your thoughts during today's meetings. But really what we're going to be focusing on for most of today is going to be the actual final recommendations. We're going to hear from 2 different subcommittees that we're meeting separately, one looking at transcript standards and one looking at ways to flag A through G status of courses that are taken as dual enrollment. After we hear from those groups, and you'll have a chance as task force members to ask questions about those recommendations so that we can sort of see how we want to integrate those into the larger document. We will then go through our draft recommendations and do line edits. There were a number of questions that came up in the review that members of the task force did in the past week that we'll flag. And for members of the public who are joining us, you can see those draft recommendations up on the C2C website. There's also a visual there that's showing sort of the evolving vision of what the recommendations are pointing toward for a data ecosystem. And we'll talk through that as part of our slides today. And then we'll finish up by determining how we need to finish, like nailing down any changes to those recommendations to wrap up the work of the committee. So that's what we'll be doing today. Next slide, please. So for folks that are joining us from the public, throughout this meeting, you can use the Q&A function. So if you look down in the bottom of your screen, you'll see sort of a little bubble with a question mark in it. That's the Q&A function. So you can click on that and you can pose questions throughout the meeting. If there's simple factual things that our team can answer, we'll go ahead and type that into chat. And then also those questions will be elevated to the task force and to the facilitator throughout. You're also welcome to put in comments to the Cradle-to-Career data system through the email address info@c2c.ca.gov at any point. Great. All right, next slide, please. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this process is that there was so much for us to learn, that what might have appeared to be a fairly narrow technical topic actually was incredibly far-ranging. We were talking about everything from employment practices to how curriculum gets approved and all the different ways that transcripts get exchanged. So I would just love to start by hearing from you, just what's one thing that you learned from this task force process? You can either unmute or you can type stuff into chat. What is it that you learned? Any brave volunteers?
Sure, I'll go.
Thanks, Omar.
So it was just very interesting to get different viewpoints and ideas from all the people that work on the JC, CSU, UC. I mean, it's just super interesting because, I mean, I think I live in my little bubble as an administrator and overseeing our A through G and dual enrollment and just our world. And it's just really interesting to see things from other people's perspectives and how passionate everybody else is also.
Similar to a comment that we see in chat from Mia. Do you want to unmute and share your comment?
Yeah, I'll really just echo what Omar said. It's been really great to learn from all of my fellow task force members about how many different stakeholders there are who are invested in getting these e-transcripts right.
Great. Well, why don't we move on? Oh, actually, Laura also has some thoughts, but then we're getting stuff into chat. Laura, do you want to unmute and share?
Sure, just quickly. I mean, I think it's very similar. So specifically, the number of existing processes and systems that have really thoughtfully been created throughout the years. And so as we were trying to look forward as to how we might streamline, it was really interesting to get all of the feedback from the various stakeholders about why systems were created in these ways and what the goals were. And so unpacking that a bit was really, really helpful and was a lot of new information for me. Thank you.
To round us up, Mary, do you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. I just appreciated the opportunity to see the through lines between these important topics and how each of these discrete themes of the meetings have really connected to one another into the overarching electronic transcript theme.
Great. All right, next slide, please. So our first subcommittee report out is going to be on the transcript standards. So we're so lucky to have from Fullerton College, Rena Martinez. I'm going to apologize in advance. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Could you unmute and share that with us?
Hi, my name is Rena Martinez Luca, and I'm the director of A&R at Fullerton College. And I was part of the standards work group.
Thank you. So why don't we go ahead and have you lead this next part where you share what the recommendations were from the group that you were part of.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so first the work group reviewed the existing California post-secondary electronic transcript standards that govern eTranscript California implementation, and it's based on the national transcript standard. The first topic we looked at was dual enrollment, and there is a home for dual enrollment notations at the course level in the existing standards, but it's not widely used. And we recommend that this be consistently implemented when possible to capture the dual enrollment participation needed for California colleges.edu to support students tracking their college eligibility status. Because this could present a lot of implementation changes, those aren't fun. We also recommend further investigation into whether this information could be reported through like a data matching process between eTrans and then CCGI. And then similar solutions could apply to both CCCCs and CSUs with that offer dual enrollment. The other thing related to the integrating with ASSIST and enhancing college planning tools, such as the transfer planners, the work group kind of looked at the existing data standards related to course transferability. And we, of course, agreed to using ASSIST for our official course information. And that it could we're hoping it could resolve issues of inconsistency in implementation of data related to these data elements in the transcript standard. And everybody was pretty much on page with that, using ASSIST. The work group recommends working with organizations that manage these tools to determine what they would need from eTrans and then identify where the standard needs to be adjusted to ensure that the data can consistently flow to these tools. Next slide. Okay. So on the topic of credit for prior learning, we had some really interesting conversation about credit for prior learning. So we looked at the existing standards and determined that this too was very inconsistently applied and not updated for some of the newer applications for CPL. We recommended leveraging the work of the Mapping Articulation Pathways Initiative, which is documenting best practices and recommend using, I never know how to say this, but PESC as a guide when possible to develop any related updates to the data standards. And it's interesting because this topic really led to like a lot of discussion about how colleges could consistently document non-traditional learning experiences and whether this is possible for CPL decisions at other colleges or to support sending these types of credentials to LERs. This is still a very new topic, so we recommend organizing a group maybe to follow national efforts around implementing standards, such as the work that's coming out of ACRO, the ACRO committee. I mean, even I'm at a community college, and even our community colleges are kind of looking at things very differently and really want guidance. So yeah, CPL. Next slide. So, so this guidance from the work group aligns with several of the broader recommendations of the task force. So a couple of things. One, to establish guidance about information each institution is responsible to documenting. Determine how we can reduce the burden on individual institutions by leveraging data exchanges at the state level. To engage further with data and tool providers to more fully document what would be required to operationalize the recommendations of the task force, and to align with national efforts around these topics versus, kind of recreating the wheel or creating conditions that will not be able to operate outside of the state. If there's any questions, can.
A note for members of the public that if you scroll down to the bottom of the draft recommendations, you'll see a full list of all the recommendations that came out of the subcommittee. There was a lot of very specific guidance that was given, such as how to address the existing credit for prior learning notations and things like that in those recommendations. So for members of the task force, do you have any concerns or questions based on what this subcommittee came up with for your consideration? Would you feel comfortable adopting the recommendations as given? I'm seeing a thumbs up from Abel. Thank you so much. I'm seeing nodding from Jake and from Laura and from John. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions for Rena, she will probably be logging off. So this is your last chance if you've got a question about this. And then we'll move on over to the other task force, or sorry, the other subcommittee. All right, well, Rena, thank you so much for your time and your expertise on the subcommittee.
Thank you. It was an honor to be on the committee. It was really, really great. So let me know if you need me for anything else, okay?
Definitely.
All right,
you.
thank you.
All right, so let's move on to our second subcommittee report out. So next slide, please. So we've actually got two subcommittee members for this on the A through G status of courses taken through dual enrollment. So Rebecca Farley coming from Kern Community College District and Omar Marquez coming from Moreno Valley Unified. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Farley, and I am Kern Community College District's Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Success Programs and Innovation. And under that umbrella is early college and dual enrollment. So this has been a very exciting conversation to be able to be part of. Thank you. I have enjoyed it greatly. And I'm so excited about the benefit of this work for the students and parents and partners we serve in dual enrollment. The committee or subcommittee explored several options, and we have made the recommendation that Assist is the data set that would be most cost effective for documenting A through G status of our college courses. This is because Assist already contains most courses taken through dual enrollment, for example, all transferable community college classes. Additionally, Assist will be providing other information about course characteristics to eTranscript California, like CalGETC and transfer major status. And perhaps best of all, counselors are already using Assist to understand other aspects of courses taken through dual enrollment to advise high school students. So adding the A through G status information to Assist may reduce fatigue of having to move back and forth between tools and help to eliminate or reduce potential data discrepancies. Next slide, please. With appropriate funding, the subcommittee believes that the technical infrastructure of Assist could track the A through G status of courses. It could also build flags to address other requirements, including a flag for languages other than English, which is Area E courses. They count for 2-year languages. Those languages other than English or LOTE credit courses. And it could include CSU and UC courses taken as dual enrollment. The recommendations that we've provided include a list of technical considerations for changes needed to Assist to develop these functionalities. And now to Omar.
Thank you. So my name is Omar Marquez, and I'm currently serving as assistant principal at Valley View High School, which is in Moreno Valley Unified School District. I have been an assistant principal for the last 6 years over guidance, and previously I was a school counselor for 13 years. So dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, career planning is definitely something that is a passion of mine. We were discussing and identifying A through G status of courses, and our goals would be for existing faculty to review the current processes that could be leveraged to document those A through G statuses for those college courses that are taken as dual enrollment. Currently, we have hundreds of students at sites that are taking dual enrollment classes, and a lot of times there may not be a plan for those students. They're taking classes sometimes because it seems interesting. At times it's because it might meet a graduation requirement, but we want to make sure that our counselors have as much information as possible, and so do our students and their families, to make more informed decisions. So what we'd like to do is use that existing faculty-approved guidance on how colleges courses fulfill those A through G requirements. And I think the key here is to create crosswalks that will lead to data elements. And kind of what was discussed previously, these are already found in Assist. I think that's kind of what it all boils down to. Assist would be the holder of all the information. I think the term I heard was the repository, and that's probably a term that I think crystallizes the idea. Make sure that faculty affirms how the guidance is translated, and of course provide support for those stakeholders from the CCCs, CSUs, and UCs to keep up with the additional courses that might be added on a yearly basis, similar to how high schools update A through G courses on a yearly basis. Recommendations include potential approaches for course evaluation. Next slide, please. And I mentioned earlier, student advising. This is evolving so fast. I think after COVID, we definitely have seen an increase in the amount of students taking dual enrollment courses at every high school. So given those concerns, students might get confused about the status of courses on the Assist website. I think currently counselors try to do their best to find information where they can. They use Assist, and some do refer to the UC doorways and check the courses that had been updated back in 2013. But definitely, if we can have Assist provide that information and other tools to support those high school students, I think that would be our best bet. High school students don't have a master's degree in counseling and don't have that experience to be able to do that. So I think our goal would be for that data from Assist to drop down to California colleges, CCGI, and that way our students could use those tools to figure out how it better assists them in regards to college eligibility, whether it's for A through G, degree attainment, or transfer requirements. There's so many different options for our students, but they might not have them all. Also create resources that help students to determine why they should take a dual enrollment course and how the course relates to both short and long-term goals. And that's kind of I think as a counselor, former counselor and current assistant principal, a big concern of ours as we're filling out these concurrent enrollment forms on a daily basis, and include information on where the courses that may be offered through dual enrollment also fulfill A through G and tools that'll help those same high school students explore their majors, and such as CSU and UC transfer planner tools. And that's pretty much my presentation. Thank you.
So I'm curious to see if people have questions about the recommendations from this subcommittee. On me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if we can go back 2 slides. I had a question about one. Okay, the last bullet here, include CSU and UC courses taken as dual enrollment. I was wondering if there should be clarification, because really any course could be taken for dual enrollment, meaning the student in high school is taking a summer course somewhere. But is this actually about including CSU and UC courses that are specifically for a dual enrollment purpose? Do you get my distinction that I'm trying to make? Because one way would be to look at the whole catalog of every UC and CSU lower division course could potentially be taken as dual enrollment, and is that what we're suggesting to include in assist? Or is it that there are specific courses that were designed and offered by CSU and UC for the purpose of dual enrollment specifically? So I think I'm suggesting maybe a word change here, and rather than saying CSU and UC courses taken as dual enrollment, like provided for dual enrollment.
Okay, so actually, both Rebecca and John came off mute. So do either of you want to address the question?
Rebecca can go first.
Thank you. As I remember the discussion, and I believe there is some additional explanation in the recommendations, I believe we're talking about the functionality. So potentially all undergraduate classes could be listed in Assist and mapped for students, but really, I think the initial phase that we've talked about is focusing on the community college classes that are already there and mapping the A through G requirements as we work through those additional conversations about what it looks like for CSU and UC classes to potentially be there as well in this centralized repository.
I will add one thing to that. It was my understanding that part of the reason for that language is specifically because the CSU system is considering doing more formal dual enrollment in addition to the normal types of concurrent enrollment that students engage in. That there was some potential for that to become an expanded space for the Cal State system, and so I think that's my understanding. Part of why that's in there in that way, right? Because it's not just the student is taking it as enrichment or because they're advanced and are engaging in some pre-matriculation enrollment, but they are actually taking it part of a potential formal dual enrollment arrangement.
I can confirm that we were working around this shift in CSU increasingly offering intentionally classes for dual enrollment. I think this does speak to sort of a point of confusion that we're experiencing. That traditionally dual enrollment was a person, that's a high school student taking a college course. And after the CCAP agreements got created that described the concept of a dual enrollment course. And I think that a lot of the discussions happening right now are about trying to sort out what are the appropriate structures when a high school student wants to engage in early college credit, and the fact that there might be more opportunities for that rolling forward. And so that if we're talking about Assist as a data set, and we're thinking about the functionality it might eventually need to contain, I think that the language was written expansively knowing that this is a set of recommendations, but that the group was trying to think about the bigger picture that was being described by the task force.
Okay, yeah, so that does make sense if we're talking about functionality versus intent, I think. So I have one more question, if you don't mind, for the next slide. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the recommendation here, though. Again, the last bullet. Support faculty from the segments to review additional courses on an annual basis. Review so it's suggesting reviewing the community college or college courses for A through G. Is that what this means? Because A through G status is the domain of specifically of UC and UC faculty.
During the meeting, the original wording said for UC faculty to review. And for clarity, just to like spell out what's in the more detailed recommendations for those who haven't had a chance to read it. The idea is that there are already crosswalks that are posted that say, this is the relationship between standard general education requirements and what would be an A through G status of that course. So the first part of this is about taking that guidance and just translating that into a flag so that it doesn't have to be done manually each time. The trickier thing had to do with courses that are not aligned with a framework like general education. So there are definitely transferable courses that can be transferred into a specific major. And so you'd have to have a bit more human review on those. And so there's a process that's recommended for that. And then on top of it, there's this idea that as new courses come up that don't fit into those existing frameworks, there should be a review process. So the request made in the subcommittee meeting was that all 3 segments faculty be consulted in that process. So that is a shift from sort of the idea of only UC looking at A through G designations. And so that was the thought coming out of the subcommittee, but I don't know if anyone else wants to speak up who was on that subcommittee about that thought.
I can speak up since I'm the one that I think said that. So just to be clear about why we asked, or why I asked for this and why this is here, and that is one of the things I think we really need to work on as all of the folks together serving the students seeking out higher education in California, is that in these spaces where there's things that we are doing together, it should be cooperative. And so I'm not trying to take away the UC's faculty final right to review and decide, but I am suggesting that the other segments should be at that table and part of a conversation about what is and isn't included here. I can tell you one of the pain points that we're facing today and why we're very deeply concerned about this. We're going through a common course numbering process in our system that's going to be very challenging. It's super important. Making sure that we're aligning our courses carefully to CID, and so that we're going to get to, at the very least, across general education, an agreed upon, essentially, course outline and set of curriculum that's going to be, allow a course to share the number across our system, to be treated across the system. But what we're facing is a possibility where we could have a course that is, we could have a course that could be used anywhere in the system, but at some colleges is going to count for A through G, at some colleges is going to count for an ADT, at some colleges is going to be accepted for into the major, and then at other universities will not be. And that's going to create enormous confusion and difficulty for students to have our system have done all this work and had these careful conversations to make sure that we are working hard to align, and having some potentially more idiosyncratic decisions being made across the institutions our students are going to. That's really going to look extremely odd and not very logical to the people of California.
Well, I can appreciate all of that. I think that in the recommendations, though, if we were going to suggest this as a recommendation, there's just a piece that's missing about then changing A through G reviews and moving it out of UC as part of the recommendation is what it sounds like. So, and like the first bullet, it says use existing faculty approved guidance. So that's UC faculty approved guidance, but somewhere now you're suggesting that there would be a shift away from that into something that's more intersegmental, if I'm understanding correctly.
We could. So I was not necessarily imagining that personally. Like I was imagining that there would be a conversation that UC would still make the decisions ultimately. But I do think it would be more powerful if we were doing it together. I think that would say a lot and communicate really important things to, the folks that are asking us to engage in this work.
Okay. Sorry, and apologies. I'm being summoned to another meeting, but my colleague Carrie Stewart is on to represent UC. Thank you. Thank you. I know this is last task force meeting, so appreciate working with everyone here.
So since I've been talking, I'm just going to kind of run with the baton that I grabbed a little bit longer, especially on this last bullet. I know this is not, we kind of talked around this in a couple of the subcommittee meetings, but I do think it's worth us surfacing it here. One of the things that we wrestle with in these intersegmental spaces is the amount of time and attention it takes to review things. And I think there is some space for us to think about how to use evidence in the way that our system is using for the Common Course Numbering project to, basically use the types of computational power and ability that are available now to actually get us some guidelines so that we are not reviewing everything on a course-to-course basis. But we can say this course is highly likely to be articulated to this point. And to be able to use that to focus our attention more helpfully on the marginal cases, right? You can say the same thing, this course is not articulated as well, like these are not the same. But it's the courses in the middle that deserve our attention, right? And defining that middle, I think, is an important thing to do collectively. But I think right now what's happening is so much doesn't happen because we force ourselves to review everything in detail rather than setting aside the layups where this is an English 1 course and it's an English 1 course everywhere in the community college system. And yet every one of those has to be reviewed individually. You know what I mean? And so I think there should be some space for us to talk about in not only supporting faculty to do this work intersegmentally, but how do we bring in evidence to make that work, to take some of the easy cases that we end up spending time on off of our plates and allow the faculty to review the tougher ones and really dig their teeth into those.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on this idea? Is this something that you'd like to consider for the recommendations?
I mean, to me, it makes sense obviously I'm talking from a high school viewpoint, right? But to me, it makes sense for community colleges to have that communication, because if the expectation is that these courses are preparing students to eventually transfer in to a UC or a Cal State, I mean, to me, it makes 100% sense, because I think that articulation between the different programs is, I think, what's going to make things better and ensure that the students are as prepared as they should be as they move from the community college to transfer to a UC or a Cal State. But I mean, that's just my opinion. Like I said, I work at a high school, and I mean, it makes sense to me just based on how we work with other high schools within our district and outside in the county.
I feel like this has the most bearing on CSU and UC. I don't know, April or Carrie, if you feel prepared to speak up on this topic right now, or because this would be a new addition to the recommendations.
I don't know that I feel entirely prepared to speak up on it, but it sounds like what John is suggesting is an exploration of this, which I think we can absolutely commit to. anything to sort of streamline those processes, those review processes. So I think it all depends on, if you choose to add it, how it's couched, but it sounds like at this point, this is an opportunity to engage in deeper conversation about ways in which we might streamline it. Is that accurate, John?
I think so. I mean, I think so. I spent a lot of time with the folks in my general counsel's office on stuff like this. Like, I think there are ways for us to use the language of the recommendation to do that, right? So if we are, go back to that. Can we actually go back to that recommendation? I actually should probably go to it in there originally. I think it's one more. Right? That's part of how we can support faculty, right? That's one of the things that we could absolutely do. And so figuring out how best to do that could be part of that process.
John, could you just free associate for a moment about how you might craft that recommendation? I'm going to do some typing while you talk.
I'm always uncomfortable when I'm free public. So what would I say? I would say, so let me just, like you want me to try and include something specific in this as written?
So I'm thinking about an additional bullet point that might say something like explore ways to engage community college and CSU faculty in reviewing the A through G status of college courses. Like, is that what you're meaning, or are you aiming for something bigger?
No, I'm aiming for something that would help us in a more powerful way simplify, that's not quite the right word. Prioritize the review process, right? So that what we can do is, so I can tell you we're using, right now we're working with a team of researchers led by a faculty member at UC Berkeley, who's done this both for Berkeley itself as well as the State University of New York system, using information from course outlines and records, from student course taking, student students' grades in those courses, what they take before and after, to really establish kind of a level of confidence of this course acts just like this, right? So to give us the opportunity to be able to say, we can reasonably say that these are the same course. And we can very reasonably say that these are not the same course and shouldn't have the same, because we're doing it in the common course number, and shouldn't be part of this category of courses. They shouldn't get this number. They're going to be a different course, right? In order for us to be able to focus our attention or resources on the courses that are in the middle, right? The courses that could be potentially articulated, but might not be, right? And so that's the type of thing I'm trying to get at. Like, how can we use real actual data that's available about courses? Oh, and they also pull course syllabi as well, right? So that they can compare things like reading lists and assignments. Like, they spend a lot of time using large language modeling as well as the data from the course taking to try and better understand which courses are really aligned with each other. So that's the type of thing that I'm trying to get to, so that we can not have some of these decisions for students hung up waiting for us to get to them, when we could say, yeah, any reasonable person would be able to see that these are very, very likely to be in area A, or to articulate from UC to from CCC to UC or CSU. That's the type of thing I'm trying to push us towards, right? To try and take all of our limited attentional resources and use them most productively, and be clear about places where we can agree that we don't need to do that.
So I've got some draft language, which oh, go ahead.
Kathy, can I make a suggestion? Could we say something like leverage current AI and research to review courses that do not have CalGETC designations?
Sounds great to me.
Okay. I have some draft text, which would be explore ways to streamline the faculty review process for course equivalency, leveraging AI and research where possible for courses that do not have CalGETC designations. Does everyone feel comfortable with that language?
I was looking for thumbs up, but we don't have that option as a React.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask if you'd mind putting that in chat.
Absolutely, I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
So for members of the public, I apologize, you can't see the chat, but I'm going to read it aloud then for those of you who can't see it. Explore ways to streamline the faculty review process for course equivalency, leveraging AI and research where possible for courses that do not have CalGETC designations. It looks like John has found his thumbs up option in chat.
Can't do it on screen.
Yeah, so maybe we just do a visual thumbs up. Who is comfortable with including this in the recommendations? I'm saying.
Can I just make one more comment?
Of course, Mia.
Yeah, I think with any AI, I think it might be important to specify that, you know, intellectual property considerations would be respected there, especially when it comes to course materials.
How would you like me to designate that in the recommendations? Maybe a parenthetical while recognizing intellectual property?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
We built that into our work with Berkeley very specifically. So that's a good call.
Great.
Kathy, I have a quick comment, and John already gave a thumbs up, so maybe I should just run with that. But I think I'm good with this statement, but I almost feel like there's a secondary recommendation that came up at the beginning of this topic, which was the inclusion of the community college faculty in the review process. And I think we kind of went away from that a little bit, but just wondering if that's something like a secondary recommendation.
Well, I think we've already got that built in, right? So that's currently in the recommendations from the subcommittee. So the question is whether or not we roll with that as the, right? It's not necessarily replacing the existing review, but creating the space for the intersegmental conversation.
Right. And I think it just goes back to, I'm blanking on the name, but the UC rep at the beginning who brought up maybe changing a word or two to the existing recommendation that we had from our subcommittee.
So the word or two, I think, was the idea that you weren't changing UC's role in making the ultimate decision, but there was a desire for consultation. So are you comfortable with that, John?
Yeah.
Okay. I will. 1 second, I'm going into the document itself just to make sure that I've got that down. As long enough, there it is, A through G, and
Kathy, to be clear, and Carrie, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I don't believe currently UC faculty review community college courses for A through G status. So I believe that this would kind of be a new process that would need to be put in place. And I think we're also saying that that process would be intersegmental.
April, to my knowledge, that's exactly right.
So I'm editing the language to say, provide funding to support staffing for an annual faculty-led process that includes UC, CSU, and community colleges before UC determines the A through G status of additional courses. Does that sound right? I'm saying nods and some thumbs up.
Yes.
Great. You okay with that too, April?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, April, for making sure that didn't get lost. Okay, any other questions for our representatives from the A through G subcommittee? All right. Well, Rebecca and Omar, thank you so much for your time. I know Omar raced back from a field trip to do this presentation. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness in this. All right, let's move on to look in totality at what has changed in the recommendations. So next slide, please. And next slide. All right, so we had such an interesting process to think about how do you explain these enormously complex ideas visually. So at the very beginning of this task force, we put out this visual that you see right here, which shows the interrelationship between eTranscript and the underlying transcripts, the career passport, things that might come in from credit for prior learning, the high school transcripts, CCGI. And there's a lot of arrows moving in a number of different directions. What was very interesting was for us to go back and revise this visual. It took us, I think, more than an hour to talk it all through about what the process of this task force has revealed would need to be changed for these tools to work together most effectively. So if we can click to the next slide, as you can see, for those of you who are looking at the screen, there's a lot of information here. What I want to do is talk you through the things that are different from Visual 1 to Visual 2. So the first thing was the addition of data standards for delivering high school transcripts. And this recommends the landmark decision by CDE and the segments to be supporting a uniform standard that would allow us to get information to flow smoothly on high school course taking. The second thing that shows up in this visual that's different is that it spells out that both the transcript requests for fulfilling the final transcripts when a student's been accepted to college, as well as the initial population of the courses that they had taken previously in the application form, would be information that would be flowing both from California colleges for high school coursework and from eTranscript for all college coursework, whether that is courses taken through dual enrollment or later on when a student is transferring from a community college to a four-year institution. So really we're saying that there's two distinct processes, and it's important to recognize that because there might be different technological needs in order to be able to do both of those functions. The third thing that changed is that we were identifying ASSIST as the place where we were getting information about course characteristics, including A through G status and the transfer status of individual courses, rather than having a situation where that's denoted separately in student information systems. There's been some issues with getting that information into the transcripts. This would ensure we would have one place where that clear documentation is that would be used consistently across platforms. The next idea is creating a data standard for college transcripts. And then we were clarifying that eTran would be used to deliver all transcripts. So this is a really big shift in the framing. Initially, we were seeing eTran as a way to get community college coursework either back to LEAs or over to four-year institutions. And when we mapped out what it would take to build the career passport and what it would mean to truly drive the advising tools that people would like to be building, that we realized it would be valuable to have all public post-secondary institutions data flowing through eTranscript California. And that sort of unlocked a lot of possibilities that would reduce both administrative burden for students, but also make it possible for us to supercharge some existing advising tools. The next thing that changed is we added the concept of a credential registry. So we were recognizing that there are academic records that are certified by faculty, and there's other types of records of learning which might be sort of validated in other ways. So that might be something coming from a military transcript. It might be an industry recognized certification. It might be a non-credit course that could then be recognized as a transcriptable credit course. And that there was a realization that we really had to have some repository for that information in order to be able to populate the career passport. So if you're looking at the visual, what's important here is that eTran is the place where all the records are being kept about academic credit, and the credential registry is where we're documenting learning that's happening in non-academic contexts. And it is the confluence of those two sources that creates the career passport. And that's really important because if we were trying to have eTranscript California serve all the needs, it would be an enormous undertaking that would be very difficult to pull off. But this allows us to sort of have different tools that serve different purposes, but can be combined through common standards that would allow us to generate many more types of information more flexibly. Another thing that was added to this is the idea that there needs to be some sort of skills verification. So having a credential registry is not enough, but we really have to make sure that we're looking at, are those skills that we value before decisions get made. Abby, 1 second, I'll get to you. And the final is the addition of employers as an end user, so that we're seeing learners as a user. We're seeing the academic institutions, but we also understand where employers fit into the mix. Okay, Abby, what's your question?
Well, no surprise, it's about employers, and I really appreciate the this infographic. It in the way you described it, Kathy, it really, I think, reflects the work we've done and shows the multiple kind of information flows and points of connection. And I see for the credential registry that skills are verified by employers and educators. And far be it for me to try to suggest making this even more complicated, but I'd like to think that, you know, we've got employers as kind of an endpoint. It would, and my comment, and we went through the career passport, I think, really quickly earlier in the meeting, and I think something that was missing from the recommendations there was the need to vet the whole concept and viability of the career passport with employers. I think that has to, I would recommend that be included to the recommendations, but I'd like to think that we would want an ongoing feedback loop from employers and the job search process that then feeds back into the whole educational system, where we can, you know, if this is well beyond the scope of this, but if we can learn in real time, you know, how effective these credentials really are people getting hired? Do we need to tweak curriculum? Do we need to change course offerings? I mean, I think ultimately, we would want employers involved in a more active way, right? And maybe there's another place that happens.
What you've actually just flagged is that we are missing some of the inputs for things like we don't have faculty represented either to indicate that they are really vetting this. But the fact that we want to see employers as not just at the end of the process, but contributing to it, I think would be really important. And we can definitely add a recommendation about how we would work with employers related to the career passport. So do you want to take a moment to try to do some speaking aloud, and I'll try to draft a recommendation from there that the group could consider?
Yes, it would be helpful for me just to look at those recommendations.
Okay, so Rocio, actually, I'm gonna share my screen because I've got the recommendations up and I'm doing some editing, and that'll make it easier for then members of the public to see this information as well. All right. Can everybody see the draft recommendations? Okay. All right. So I'm down at career passport, and you'll I'm using the suggesting mode, so the words that I'm writing are in a different color, so we can see that they were added during the meeting. So I started to write in here, work with employers to validate the career passport, but I don't think that was exactly what you said, Abby. So do you want to?
No, it's almost, you could almost adopt the language in the prior bullet point about ensure that the career passport is designed is meaningful and useful for employers, or as part of the development of the career passport, that develop a process for vetting concepts and specific tools with employers with representation by sector, occupation, region, size, or just say a broad, see my thinking process here, a broad group of employers from from different sectors and sizes. And I'm happy to try to polish that a little better. Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear what others think about Abby's draft language.
I like it. I would just say we probably have to have something that's a little bit more open. in a way. So like other things that we've been doing with some of our task forces that have, everyone interested in it is providing a feedback opportunity that's more broad than just from the people that get invited to the table, right? Because there's so many employers throughout California. If we try and do it regionally with different sizes, we're still going to miss lots and lots of different employers and skill sets. And so I think we need to have a more robust method for folks of any size to weigh in at any point, right? To be able to say, these are the types of things that we'd like to see in this. And then the folks, whoever is organized to work on that would, review what's coming in from, a broader employer public.
Yeah, I think that's a great call, John, and we could borrow from folks in the technology sector where every time you buy something, you're asked to rate it or rate your interaction. I mean, there could be ways of asking employers to continually rate their experience with the career passport and the extent to which it was a helpful tool. There's a concept, I don't know if it fits here, Kathy, but I mean, the career passport could be such an effective tool and I know this is coming up in many other conversations, in the movement towards skills first and skills-based and skills first hiring.
Sorry, could you restate that? What is that, another recommendation?
Oh, it's probably just an inchoate thought that's coming out of my mouth, but maybe, I don't know if this is a solid recommendation here, but I'll throw it out. Explore the ways in which the career passport could be an effective tool for employers in skills-based hiring, which means using the kinds of skills taxonomy to competency-based language that we've been talking about.
I'm actually going to move that up here because this was something that was definitely part of the conversation we had in prior meetings, that there was a real concern that we're not really sure how employers are going to use it, and that we were hearing from other states that they found things like a sector-based strategy to be really useful because different types of employers might use a tool like a career passport differently. So I've just got that as a first step, and then the idea that we could be tried out with the public workforce system.
Yeah, that's great.
Any concerns about this new wording?
I always find ensure to be a little bit weak. Like I think we should say things like fund the research, fund ongoing evaluation and research necessary to. Right, because I think, Abby, that's what you're saying, that we need to constantly do the evaluation of the utility of it. That's work, and ensuring that it is, they're like, oh yeah, we will. But if we say, like, you need to actually put dollars behind doing this difficult work, then we have a different conversation, right?
Yeah, I think you're going in a good direction. I mean, this may just, we may have different perspectives on this. I don't know if I'd include research is a given, but it's almost just develop a, continuous feedback loop. I mean, just use some of the, business language here. Because I'm thinking of something that's really live and active and constant that we use, rather than a research project. Which I don't mean to suggest that research is not used or useful.
I've got fund a continuous feedback loop and ongoing evaluations to ensure the career passport is useful for employers, including a process for gathering feedback on the concepts and specific tools from a broad group of employers.
Sure.
All right. So are there any other high level bits of input that people want to give? And then I'll dig into places where we had sort of issues that I felt the group needed to resolve before we could finalize the recommendations. Oh, John.
So I have one more thing that I want to raise because we kind of talked adjacent to it a lot, and I don't think we hit it head on. And so I think one of the powerful things that we've been wrestling with is trying to address how this kind of like intersegmental record keeping sharing process has created all kinds of barriers for students. And I think one of the things that some of the students talked about early, and I know that some of our students feel pretty powerfully, is the cost that this can create for students as they're moving between systems, especially as they're potentially applying to multiple institutions. And so I'd really like to put on the table that we talk about, if we are building this system for the students of California, that it should be free for them to use as they move between California institutions. And so I'd like to, I don't know if propose, suggest that we consider, recommendation that we make this, we make what we're building free to use for the students of California as they apply between the institutions of California at minimum.
So I'm going to do some draft language. Make eTranscript California free to all students. Is that what you're saying, John?
Love that. I'm not sure, like, I think we have to maybe start with students in public institutions of California. I'm not sure. Like, I love this. This is great. It's clear everyone gets this. So how about, no, start with that and then let's talk about it. And if we have to walk it back, then we can. But go back to the first one.
Okay. All right. So it says make it free to all students. So right now, the way if we're thinking of eTranscript as the universal public post-secondary transcript, then it is just free to those students. There is an idea that's in here that we're posting the standards for how it would work to make it possible for example, independent colleges to plug in to their application forms in the same way that the public segments would be able to. But we did not talk about passing any data from independent colleges as part of this. So that's an important distinction. Mary, I saw your hand was raised.
Oh, apologies. I was clicking the chat button. Sorry.
No worries. So do people want to go with this bigger statement of making eTranscript California free for all students? I'm seeing Abby's nod her head. I'm seeing yes from Amia. Let's see. Trying to get to where I can see everyone's faces. Thumbs up from Abel. Carrie, how do you feel about that? Thumbs up. All right. Anyone who doesn't agree? Let's try it that way also. All right. Thanks, John.
So Kathy, this
Yes.
is April. I wouldn't say I don't agree with that, but I do think there is, and we've been having this conversation for years with community colleges and other colleges, that this would equal to a loss of funding for schools. So I don't know if maybe we could just recognize that in this recommendation.
So we do have a section down here on funding and implementation. So maybe provide funding to compensate colleges for revenue previously derived from transcript fees.
I like that. Yeah,
Yes.
we have the same conversation. So I think that's an important flag. So that's, I don't know how many transcripts that you guys send out. So our colleges make, some of our colleges make a small amount of money, but it turns out to be kind of important-ish because it's fungible money, right? Like you can use it for whatever hole you want, as opposed to a lot of our other funding, which have very kind of narrow uses. So it ends up being slightly more useful per dollar than your average funding stream.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just take us to the top of the document. And what I've done is I've left the comments where there were questions. So in this, Hanmi had sort of raised this issue of, wow, we're now talking about eTranscript being a transcript for UC and CSU as well. And so I just want, I mean, I understand that she's not here, and so Carrie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any qualms about that approach?
You know, it's hard to speak to since I haven't attended all of the meetings and I'm not sure when that shift occurred. And so, you know, it would be helpful if I kind of understood when and how that happened until I saw the second version of the graphic today. With all of the segmental transcripts, I had not seen that. So maybe just if I could get some more context, that would be helpful.
So there were two different use cases for why it would be valuable to have eTrans serve all the public post-secondary institutions. So the first actually was with dual enrollment. So originally we were thinking about this just as a phenomenon where high school students were taking community college classes. But when April started raising issues about how CSU is really leaning into offering early college credit, we realized that so our fix right now, just to sort of recap this, is that what's going to happen is because CCGI knows who all of the 9th through 12th grade students are through a data exchange that they get from CDE, we can actually match using eTran to definitively understand which high school students are taking college classes, which is something we don't know cleanly right now. But then we realized, well, if you don't have the CSU data, or if students are doing this through UC and we're counting that, then we would need to have a mechanism to get those data over as well. So that was the first place where we suddenly thought, oh, wait a second, this can't just be for community colleges. And then the second use case became, as we started talking through the way you could be using eTranscript data to make existing tools like CSU's transfer planner so much more powerful. Because if you're having a student just be like, oh, just load all the classes I've taken, then instead of trying to go from a pick list that's derived from assist, you could do some really cool things like if-then scenarios. Oh, I'm trying to figure out what to enroll in next quarter. Like if I'll try this or this, and what does that mean? And we realized, because the issue had been raised, that there's also transfer planners that UC offers, and there's increased functionality planned for the program pathways mapper, which is a community college tool, that if we could have all the data in one place, wouldn't that be fantastic? That as high school students are increasingly getting early college credit, as we're building out the transfer pipelines, there'd just be one place you could go and it would all be there, but that requires that we have the course taking data on all the segments.
Understood. That's really helpful. Thank you. You know, I'll go back and talk to Hanmi about it to get a little bit more information about that. It sounds reasonable to me. So I would say kind of proceed from there.
Okay.
So I want to add one thing to that, which is to say, I think one way for us to think about this is it's a forward-looking, but not necessarily hard requirement. So we're going through the process right now of having a conversation about, you know, whether or not we may have the appetite to build a system-wide ERP. And there's a variety of different ways that we may still land, you know, so we have a whole separate task force and subgroups on that. But one of the conversations we're having is like how to navigate whether or not people would participate. And where it looks like we're headed, that we may land is that we have the conversation with everyone up front to make sure it's designed in a way that everyone could participate. That is, we're taking into account everyone's business processes, you know, whether or not they have a personnel permission, you know, what systems they have HR on, and the student information system, and all those things, so that, you know, if they choose to use it, they can. But if we don't involve them in the conversation to design, in the design, right, it would be very hard for them to choose later. And so I think the way that I read this personally was that we are explicitly doing this, so we're designing it to invite everyone to participate, so that if they choose to use it, they can, and that it's functional for everyone to be able to use it. That's how I read it. And I see Kathy adjusted the language a little bit, but that's how I was thinking about it.
I'm going to read it aloud so everybody knows what I just changed. It originally said expand eTranscript California to share information on course taking at all community colleges, CSUs, and UCs. And I turned it to design eTranscript California so that it can share information on course taking at all three segments. I'm saying that looks good to Carrie. April, how does that seem to you?
So I guess my concern is that we would have equity issues. So if 100 community colleges and 23 CSUs and 5 UCs decide to participate in eTrans California, and we're building all of these systems and integrations and advising tools around this data, and then you have community college students from 16 community colleges and 4 UCs that don't have access. I have a concern with that because I think that we're trying to make sure that there is information and support for all of our students. So, I mean, we've been talking about this recommendation in the eTran California Steering Committee since I believe 2021. So it's been something that we've discussed for years, and I think that we need to be more bold, and we need to make sure that all students are able to receive the services and that we have technology in place to support those tools and to support our students.
I totally support staying bold. I'm just not sure I was imagining that level of boldness. And to be clear, let me kind of just explicate my expectations for the design process. The idea was not that, like for us, so let me speak to our system. Our goal was for 100% of our system to participate. That's going to be our goal. That's what we're going to push. We're going to lead that way. That's absolutely where we wanted to go. What I was imagining is that we were designing it so that the University of California system and the California State University system could decide yay or nay as a system, and then how you wanted to handle whether or not you let individual colleges opt in or out. I would leave that to your governance. But that's so I wanted it to design it so it would be available and work for all the for everyone, right? For all the institutions for across the 3 systems, so they're designed to be able to support that. And then, I'm open to the possibility that, UC or CSU wouldn't want to come in right away. And if you wanted to do some in, some out, I'm open to that too. But I love the bold, like, let's build it for everyone and everyone's all in. That would be much more powerful for the state of California, for sure.
You can also name this. So if at the top, we're saying it's designed for complete interoperability, and then we add another bullet that says, establish segment level processes and how to bring all colleges into eTranscript California. That buys some time. So for example, for the UC to go to each of the universities and sort of figure out what's right there, and for CSU to determine the appropriate approach for their campuses. Does that feel like a comfortable way to be bold, but also give some time for a process?
Yeah, Kathy, thank you. I appreciate that language. I think, we've had the conversation with our campuses about transcript delivery from eTranscript, but we need to have some deeper conversations about this broader vision of how it will be used. And so, yeah, I appreciate that language. Thank you.
So Kathy, maybe just to put a little clarification on there is the sending and receiving of transcripts, because I think the UC and the CSU are very big receivers right now, but we are not senders. And I believe that's where the piece and the change from a CSU and a UC perspective would be. And then on the community college side, I think the majority of them are senders, but not receivers.
We have a slight majority of receivers, but not everyone. Right. Our 100% goal is with the new platform. We're all in both ways.
We establish processes for CSU and for UC, and how to have all universities send information through eTranscript California, because that's the thing that is sort of what needs to be fleshed out, is my understanding. Is that right?
I think, I would appreciate still saying send and receive, just to make clear that it's a two-way process.
What we're basically acknowledging is that there's two parts to it, kind of like we had to acknowledge that there's two parts to how you pass transcript information as part of an application process, and that we're allowing space for each of the 4-year segments to sort of have the conversations about how to move this forward. Okay. And John, do you want to have anything in here that's specific to the community colleges? Like, have all community colleges adopt eTranscript California for sending and receiving information?
I'm good for that.
Okay. And Mark helpfully shared, representing the Tech Center, that 109 of the 116 colleges are currently receivers. Okay. All right, so we've now addressed that area of questions. Move something on my screen a little bit. Let's see. I think there was a clarification here. This is how this point, it was to help explain what I voiced over for Carrie earlier about why you need to have those in. This comment here was about the faculty review process, which we've already discussed. And then this was a comment from Abby about regulating, let's see, wait, that's right?
I think it's from me.
Oh, there's two. There's one from Abby and there's one from Mia. So Mia, why don't you go ahead and voice over this language that's here?
Yeah, I'm suggesting a recommendation to regulate providers of credit for prior learning. I'm anticipating a future when CPL is more visible through eTranscript and therefore more valuable in admissions and in credentialing and in employment. And I'm anticipating that will be seen as a potentially new market for providers of CPL. As we've already talked about today, faculty oversight over these academic matters is really important, but very time and labor intensive. And this may not be something that faculty bodies such as academic senates and other committees and task forces can accomplish alone. So in other words, I think there's a possibility in the future that faculty exercising this oversight, could be asked to consider what might be assessed as junk micro credentials from CPL providers. And I think that's not a good use of faculty time. And so regulatory support in that area could be very valuable.
So this actually relates to comments from both Abby and from Sam. So Sam, do you want to explain briefly your thought about having there be more than just approved credentials in the credential registry?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. We are thinking of having credentials in the registry that have been evaluated by faculty, by local faculty, and articulated for CPL in the registry, as well as certifications and licensures in the registry that haven't yet been evaluated, but that students come to our systems with, or employers make use of. And those would be reflected in the registry, whether or not they have an evaluation associated with them. And I'm wondering about the use of the term CPL provider. I think that might refer to, for instance, ACE's national guide as opposed to the military guide. Is that what you're thinking on the, as a CPL provider, so as an agency that makes recommendations for credit for industry licensure outside of California, and maybe making recommendations for educational providers that would not necessarily be recognized by our faculty in California? I don't want to name names, but is that what you're sort of thinking of?
Sam, I think what you're describing is actually a form of the regulation that I'm envisioning when I suggested CPL provider here. I'm actually I had in mind whatever entity might be offering the certificate or the badge or something like that.
Okay, yeah, because it's all over the place. You know, it doesn't take anything to create and offer a badge. Yeah, there's no validation, no standardization, you know, and so I think that there's that concern, right? We can't. There are over 1 million combinations of badges and licensures and certifications, of which a virtual handful are used comparatively often, and so we wouldn't want to have a burden to evaluate all of those, nor take the evaluations made by others. So the way I've always approached it is to only recognize the evaluations made by our regionally accredited minimum faculty who meet minimum qualifications in their discipline area, recognize and catalog those articulations. And anything that does not have that would have to be evaluated by the faculty at our community colleges, and those decisions stored. Nothing would be wholesale included in the registry with CPL unless it were. No CPL would be included unless it were approved by the faculty. But I don't know if I'm addressing your concern. Are you concerned that we might be inundated with requests to evaluate junk badges and certifications?
That's my concern. Exactly. Yeah.
And also predatory training.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. We should probably explore ways to mitigate it.
So we have funding for a faculty equivalency body to review the stuff that's generated, and that, so maybe we append this and ensure well, I mean, are you comfortable with Mia's language here, or how would you amend her draft language? So it says currently regulate CPL providers in order to prevent exploitation of new CPL opportunities by predatory for-profit entities. So just leave that there.
I think that's fine. I think that will take care of itself from my experience so far. But as we grow this whole area of CPL, you're right, there will be people who want to really exploit it as a new market. They're doing that now, actually, and we're not necessarily recognizing their CPL in the system. So they've been doing this for quite a long time, using it for their own purposes. But we have not been recognizing in our system the CPL that they give. But I can see that would be helpful to have some regulatory process in place.
You know, I'm appreciating what you're saying, Sam, and the point you brought up, Mia, and just kind of thinking about the analogies in the apprenticeship world, where there are also just a proliferation of private apprenticeship providers. I mean, what you've got up in the second bullet point, Kathy, is, apprenticeship. Would we want to modify that and say registered apprenticeship, just to also put some guardrails on, that we're not talking about just any, group that does something calls it an apprenticeship, because apprenticeship has a very defined meaning, and it being registered either by the state or the Federal Department of Labor means that it has met certain standards.
All right, so I want to acknowledge we're 4 minutes from the end of the meeting. So I want to do a quick pulse check and see, is there anyone who has any concerns with adding this new language, specifically regulate CPL providers in order to prevent exploitation of new CPL opportunities by predatory for-profit entities? Does anyone have any concerns about adding that to the recommendations?
I think we just maybe don't need the word predatory.
Yeah.
Like we're good. And then we don't necessarily need for-profit either. We just need the folks that are, providing this to have some level of regulation, right? Yeah, that's exactly right.
So it just took out, just to prevent exploitation.
And we could say that, but you know what I mean? Like, I think we just need to review that for all of us, because mea culpa, full disclosure, I'm not sure that hasn't happened within our educational institutions in the past, right? So I think we just need to make sure that we are being even-handed in the regulations that we are, holding everyone accountable to, and that should apply to all of us.
Okay, so I'm just gonna name the last thing that didn't get covered, which is that Abby had a question about whether employers should be involved in evaluating whether to award academic credit. And so I want to make sure that I understood that, because we do have a place where employers are validating for the career passport whether a badge is of high value. Were you intending to have that be part of the credit determination as well?
It was more of a question, and probably a bigger discussion than we have for 3 minutes. But I think we may have covered the employer feedback loop in the career passport section. But I mean, at some point, I think it could be really interesting to explore. I appreciate that credit is academic credit, but to have some, vetting that, this was legitimate work-based learning, or that there were competencies developed in the work-based learning. So I don't know if there's a placeholder that we could develop later, something to explore.
What do people feel? Do you want to add a bullet point for explore ways that employers could give input on the value of credentials as an item? I'll write that down so people can see.
Or another meaning, Kathy, that the prior learning that is work-based learning, that the competencies be confirmed by employers for people to get credit.
Okay.
There has to be some employer validation.
People feel comfortable with that framing. Explore how employers could provide feedback on the competencies embedded in work-based learning
For CPL.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's CPL assessment.
Yeah, that's a need.
Okay, so in our last minute, what I want to do is quickly say next steps. I'm going to send this document back out, cleaned up, and everyone will have a chance to review it so that you don't feel rushed just because we're out of time now. If there are significant issues that get raised when people do final review, we'll engage all of you to figure out the right way to get to resolution on that before these recommendations are finalized. Once finalized, they'll be posted on the Cradle-to-Career website and submitted as part of the process for the Career Education Master Plan for its consideration. I want to give the last 15 seconds to Marianne if you would like to just close out this task force.
I would be happy to. So first, just a huge thank you to the task force members. I have 2 reflections on this from the past 6 months. One is I'm really excited about some of the concrete early wins, like the new high school transcript standard, like the new data flows between the Community College Chancellor's Office and CCGI to better serve dual enrollment students. And then the second reflection is just how much you were focusing on reducing administrative burdens for students and really thinking about how we can all work together across our different institutions on that. And I'm struck by how incredibly specific today's recommendations are. And that specificity gives me hope about the possibilities for our future work together. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how
these recommendations inform the master plan for career education. So thank you to the task force and all the work that you dedicated to this. Thank you to the community members who've listened in and shared your insights too. And finally, many thanks to Kathy and her team for so thoughtfully facilitating this process on behalf of Cradle-to-Career. So with that, congratulations, and we're concluding the work of this task force. Thank you.